What's going on, creeps? Doc here, back at you to brighten another day. Now, here on my end, I know that it's Friday night, but on your end, for all I know, you are at some point in the future. So, hello, man from the future. Hello, woman from the future. Doc Fugate's got an interesting one for you today. Today, we're going to be discussing two very different acquired tastes. On the heels of the 30th anniversary of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I was not able to stop myself from watching it again for probably about 30th time or so. And what stood out to me, like always, was fucking Dennis Hopper's performance as Lefty Enfield, Sheriff Lefty Enfield. Leaving me really curious as to the film's timeline, because like you, I'm a man of the future and I can look back and archive these things. And I wanted to look at it in relation to what was going on in his life. Because I have since, for the very first time, seen another bizarre film powered by Hopper, and that was Blue Velvet. After seeing his take on this sexually deprived small-town gangster in Frank Booth, I was utterly mystified and had to learn everything I could about how he pulled off playing such a fucking ridiculously clinically insane character. And a large part of it, I guess, was the headspace he was in from getting sober. Like, after spending literally 20 years of his life as the character in Easy Rider, he fucking just had to buckle down and get sober because no one would fucking hire him because of how ridiculous he was. So, I mean, this led me to wonder if Dennis was in a similar state of mind for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And I realized that once I did a little tiny bit of research as a man from the future, realized that the movies came out just 2 months apart from each other. So along with two other films that year, including Hoosiers, the high school basketball movie that fucking got him nominated for an Oscar too. The fourth movie, it escapes me, honestly. Something about a river? I can't remember. So either way, we have liftoff for today's episode. Dennis, but mainly this performance in particular, which I know in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's a movie in general that has repulsed so many, but I am frequently compulsed to watch. And I also know a lot of people will feel the same way. Same thing with Blue Velvet. I know you feel the same way. I'm also doing this because it's just past the 1-year anniversary of Tobe Hooper's death. And it really caught me by surprise that it had been so long already. Surprise being the same way that almost all of his movies would, along with a little fun fact here that he directed the Billy Idol Dancing With Myself music video. If you didn't know that, now you do. This was a music video that I always just thought of as like a dystopian version of Dancing in the Streets. Mick Jagger and David Bowie. But now I got a totally new scope on appreciation for it after discovering this little factoid that Mr. Tobe Hooper directed it, I think, just after everybody was shitting on him for allegedly not directing The Poltergeist and letting Steven Spielberg make a horror movie without having to officially make a horror movie. I don't know. That's all speculation, and I'm not going to tarnish his reputation seeing as he's deceased. But either way, check out the Dancing With Myself music video by Billy Idol, and tell me that video doesn't remind you of like a cross-pollination between the Dancing in the Streets music video and the Buffalo Bill scene where he's actually dancing with himself in Silence of the Lambs. I'm not certain whether or not they changed his look, but like as we go into the hard close-ups on Billy Idol, he's got a lot of makeup on, letting off some hardcore "would you fuck me" vibes. I mean, maybe this isn't too important to many, but I'm sure this will be an amazing revelation to at least one person listening to this, and it's an amazing revelation, so you're welcome. And I also just recently revisited that awesome episode of Tales from the Crypt that Tobe Hooper did. I think it was on the anniversary of the day he passed away, because I just watched it within the last week. The Voodoo episode with James Remar and Whoopi Goldberg and the guy who played Gimli. Oh yeah, and what's her face? God damn it. The girl that fucking Bill Cosby kicked off of the Cosby Show for like being a whore and getting naked in that Angel Heart movie. I can't remember her name. This obviously being hysterically ironic since Bill Cosby is a disgusting pig. But yeah, that's a really good one. And speaking of which, I was just fucking around on Twitter the other day, and speaking of Tales from the Crypt, this has reminded me of John Lovitz mentioned his episode on his Twitter with John Astin and Bruce Boxleitner. And it was like, I don't know, somebody had just like tweeted out that like they loved that episode and like posted a picture, and he just fucking retweeted it saying like, "Oh, we just couldn't stop laughing. Oh, me, John Astin, and Bruce Boxleitner. We all had such a fantastic time." I mean, that's not to say that I don't really like John Lovitz. I mean, he was in my hands down favorite era of Saturday Night Live, and he's a very funny guy. I just don't know. The guy just has gone off the deep end hard. Like, he started doing stand-up at 50 years old, and I mean, just YouTube this. Just look this up on YouTube right now, if you can. Look up John Lovitz stand-up. Trust me, you're only going to have to watch about 2 minutes of it to see what I'm talking about. I mean, that's part of how I got lost in the guy's fucking Twitter, is because the guy gets like 20 likes and 5 retweets on all of his posts. I saw him fucking, he's at the point where he's fucking making a sequel. Like, I saw him plug in the sequel to the Benchwarmers with that guy with the one stray strand of hair from American Pie. Yeah, the two of them are at the point where they're doing the fucking straight to DVD. Or maybe it might not. They might even be at the point right now where they're not even bothering to physically manufacture these fucking movies anymore. Because, I mean, what's the point? Like, maybe like 10 people are going to watch it on VOD. Like, I can't picture anybody actually wanting to buy something like that. I don't know. That was just funny to me. I don't know. Look up John Lovitz on Twitter. Look up John Lovitz on YouTube, and you'll definitely get a little chuckle. Now that informality is out of the way, we can get down to brass ticky tacks. Chainsaw 2 came out so long after the original that it must have seemed so jarring and ultra-modern to the audience back then in contrast. But I am a man from the future, and these things are so simple to me, seeing the things that have come to pass since then in the past 32 years. It opens on a very hard line, it just shows how fucking 80s we're going with these two, like, bombastic college yuppies on a country road bender. They're calling into our main character, a lovely radio DJ named Stretch, played by the still very lovely Caroline Williams, and they are subsequently murdered by Leatherface while on the line. I mean, just from the mannerisms and behavior of these hot shots and the legendary slasher, who was surfing on the bed of a pickup truck with the body of a drifter strapped to his front. And as well as this fucking the VFX work from the god himself, Tom Savini, we can already tell that this all but screams at the audience that this is going to be fucking the most bizarre show that they could possibly be in for. The time gap also seems to have made a direct impact on these decisions largely, since movies were given so much more credence and leeway as far as gore and shit was concerned in the mid-80s, definitely. But in comparison to the early 70s, I mean, this movie did take it too far. And they just fucking didn't get it rated, because they knew it was going to get an X rating at that point, apparently. It didn't get an R rating until I think 2000 was when it got rated. So, I mean, he took it to the extreme, definitely. Like I said, though, compared to shit from today, it's really not that extreme, but for then, it was just so balls to the wall. It's a super interesting dynamic. Honestly, all of my love aside for Hopper, I need to admit that this shift in tone is one of the most fascinating elements of this movie. I mean, Tobe Hooper took the bone-dry humor from the original. I mean, the original definitely is a very, 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 very dark comedy. Super dry humor. And this one takes that same kind of humor, but just drenches it in fucking a billion gallons of Tom Savini's fake blood. I think the funniest part about the fact that it didn't get a rating is that basically it seemed like as a middle finger to every normal person in the 80s, they fucking took almost every character except for Dennis Hopper, who, despite my loving him so much in this movie, apparently said it was the worst work he ever did. Because, I mean, which I wouldn't doubt, because, like I said, he was that desperate for fucking work at this time and shit to get his mind off of everything. But from everything I've heard, he was a consummate professional on the set, as opposed to how he was before, which, Which is pretty cool. Even if he was phoning it in, at least he wasn't being a dick about it. Where was I? Fuck, I just sidetracked myself. Oh yeah, there we go. I think my favorite comparison to make between Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and the original and another series is Rob Zombie's whatever House of a Thousand Corpses, fucking Devil's Rejects, whatever he's calling that franchise, since he's making a third one right now. I don't know what the name of that would be. They don't even think they have a name for the family in that, do they? But all that aside, I think that it's a very interesting dynamic in the sense that not only did Rob Zombie in his sequel lift a pretty hefty bit from Texas Chainsaw 2, but I think Rob Zombie, like, I have a lot of foibles with Rob Zombie's writing, other than Lords of Salem, which I think is actually kind of a masterwork, if I may say so myself. I think he kind of one-upped Tobe Hooper in this sense. Well, I mean, he took the idea of the crazy fucking sheriff going after revenge in his sequel, but Rob Zombie did a really good job with William Forsythe, in how he just fucking drove that character crazy and essentially just turned him into the fucking bad guy by linking him so much to the original one. And it was just a lot more disconnected with Lefty. I mean, it's a completely different thing, but I think that it's really funny that Tobe Hooper was so disciplined in his original and then kind of just went balls to the wall and said, fuck it with this one. But Rob Zombie in those movies, I think, I don't think anything to me feels as similar to Texas Chainsaw as House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, but I think Rob Zombie did the opposite. He threw all his balls to the wall in House of a Thousand Corpses. I mean, it was his first movie. He didn't really know what he was doing that much. He wasn't like a trained filmmaker. But then with Devil's Rejects, he really seemed to fucking buckle himself down and try and make it something that you could coherently follow along with and care about what's going on in these characters and so on and so forth. I don't know, I just think that's an interesting link between films with this one. Alright, enough of that chit-chat. Let's get back to Austin, Texas. After this bit of foul play on the highway, on those country roads, whatever the fuck they were, Hopper's character, Sheriff Lefty Enfield, travels from Dallas to Austin to investigate the murder of these two nameless, motiveless college students. He's soon approached by Stretch, who brings herself to him as a witness of the murder. Since she was the closest to it, with their call on her show, she read about him in the paper. She read about Lefty in the paper, where he's painted in the story as a lunatic who's chasing down a ghost story, in his attempt to link this to the massacre from the original, whose victims, incidentally, Sally and Franklin, the fat boy in his wheelchair, and his sister, the one who survived, apparently they were related to him. This is probably my personal favorite aspect, like I was saying, with how Rob Zombie lifted it. I mean, this is probably the coolest idea you could lift in a fucking slasher sequel. Have the law come after have the law play just as dirty as our antagonists. I think that's an interesting dynamic, because the law can be just as scary when it's pushed to those limits. But yes, this is definitely my favorite link to part one, other than the fact that it's not really linked to part one, other than that sentence about Sally and Franklin. I mean, so this gives us a decent little glance into the ride that we're collectively in for. We got ourselves another Sally-like girl, but Stretch seems to have a little bit more gumption to her than Sally had. Like, we don't need too much of a transition here. She already seems like a pretty rough and tumble chick. So collectively as an audience, we're going on this ride with fucking Lefty Enfield, the crazy sheriff from Dallas who's trying to hunt down the people who killed his niece and nephew, and this attractive yet wild young woman. So, I mean, it's pretty good company as far as I'm concerned. After this meeting, Stretch arrives late, obviously, at a chili cook-off, which she's going to, obviously, report on, because she has to talk about so many important things as a local disc jockey. The interesting thing about this is that the chili cook-off is won by one Drayton Sawyer, a.k.a. the old-timer, our cook from the original. Jim Sydow is actually the only actor to return from the original. I think he's the only one to reprise any role in any of these, because I don't think Gunner did any of the other ones but the original. Rest in peace, Gunner, as well. But, the old guy, the one, going back to the guy, the one who won the chili cook-off, he's the guy who ends up picking up Sally when she first thinks that she escapes the house, and then he brings her back for supper time. Well, his name's Drayton Sawyer, and Drayton Sawyer accepts the award and proves that his special meat was indeed served outside of the family household. One of the few direct callbacks to the first film. Like, this is really, like I said, this is really the only, other than Tobe Hooper and Jim Sydow, there really wasn't, like, anything directly to link the two movies together in continuity. So this direct callback may be in the sense of Drayton, also in the fact of his chili. Because we do see Franklin's wheelchair-bound skeleton in the very end of the movie, so who knows? Maybe his fat, annoying ass was the special ingredient in the chili. Tasting good was probably all Franklin was good for. That is no way, shape, or form a shot at him being paralyzed. I'm simply shitting on him for being one of the most annoying characters in any horror movie, or maybe even cinema history. I can say this as a man from the future. This is another contrast from the original, which showed the Sawyer family as predators waiting on their prey in their home, like they're just a big bear trap or a sinkhole for people to fall into in the original. Like, a lot of movies in the 70s I've read had families like that, like The Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left, and blah, 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 like a fucking sinkhole of evil that these normal people just fall into. And these people are kind of just like the runoff of society who are just so angry at everything. And in some cases, actual deformed monsters. But I digress. So here, the Sawyer family have taken the world by the balls, like many Reaganauts were doing at the time, and they're blasting off into the world of success. Which, I mean, which is a pretty amazing idea that you could flip it on its head like that they go from something so simple in such a simple time to the 80s when, like, people were just spending, doing fucking so much coke, being so extravagant, and he went with it in this, and he made the Sawyer family go with it in this. And it's so perfect because, I mean, literally what is a better idea in that sense than fucking collecting people as meat, which they then in turn would prepare and sell back to the public for mass consumption. Like, I mean, it ties together so well with, like, just the idea of consumerism. And, I mean, you can say what you want about how dumb of a movie this is, but there's definitely some stuff that you can find under the crevices, like I've done here. And while these ridiculous revelations are being made, or maybe not being made by the audience, I don't know. Maybe you'll have to look back at that to see if I got any salt to what I'm saying there. Because I went on a pretty long rant back there about and digging pretty deep, fishing pretty deep for analysis in this movie. But I think I hit the money there. Watch it again and tell me I'm wrong. Alright, so Lefty has arrived now at a chainsaw store to pick up some artillery for the looming battle that we know we're about to engage in. And Stretch meets up with him again at his hotel room afterwards. She's begging for something to do that would actually, you know, have some consequence and help, which she was trying to do at first, but he kind of just wrote her off. But like I said, she's got a little spunk, some gumption. And so he tells her that, you know, she's got the tape of the murder, so why doesn't she just play it over the radio? And I think she does, and I think she plays it as Lefty's request. And she reasons with the station that people are always going to hate the request anyway. People are always going to complain, regardless of what they're hearing. Which I thought was pretty funny, because people always do complain about those types of things. Even if you were hearing somebody get murdered, people would probably complain just as much as if, I don't know, Iron Man got put on the radio. I don't know. I digress. So he says to her that playing that would do more than he ever could. And it does. While it's being played over the radio, Mr. Drayton Sawyer, who's bringing his trophy with chili inside of it back home, and he gets a call on his yuppie car phone, proving Lefty correct, because not too long after playing the tape, Leatherface and his brother Chop Top, a new brother, reminiscent of the hitchhiker from the original, this new one, Chop Top, who's played very well by Bill Moseley, again, another tie to House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. He's fucking Otis in those movies. I think this was his first big break. But he's Chop Top. His character is very reminiscent, like I said, of the original Hitchhiker. And he's a Vietnam vet who has returned home with a plate in his head and he has the plate in his head because he got the top of his head chopped off by a machete, therefore Chop Top. He also carries around a coat hanger, which is he's constantly sterilizing with a lighter and seemingly itching his plate with the wire hanger. But I looked into this, and apparently this is giving old Chop Top some kind of sexual release. I don't know, you're gonna have to look into this and look at his expressions during his scenes, I guess. And we also meet a new face on an old character. 2 new faces, literally and figuratively. Leatherface, who is mainly referred to as Bubba in this film, does not look very reminiscent of Gunnar Hansen. Fuck, I can't remember what the new actor's name was. It was Billy something. I'm sure you'll have, you're screaming it right now and you'll tell me in the comments. But we got a new actor and, we got a new mask from Savini, which kind of makes up for it in spades because, I don't know, like I said earlier, Savini is the god when it comes to special effects, and yeah, just his masks in general are very cool. He's done some cool commission work for like WWE and stuff like that. So Leatherface becomes a lot more of a cartoonish presence, like I was saying earlier, than the original, especially because of this mask and this new fresh take on the character, which is a lot more... He's still just as, like kind of bashful and anxious as he is in the original, but it's a lot more cartoonish in this one, like to an extent of like Daffy Duck or fucking Bugs Bunny. So yes, this is all very jarring, I do have to admit. I mean, just because of the overall ridiculous tone of this all. I mean, I'm not here reading off my grocery list to you. This is a grocery list of like weird fucking bizarre shit, especially if you've never seen this before. But I mean, even if you have seen it, I'm sure me listing this off reminds you how fucking ridiculous and grotesque this movie is. So Leatherface, in his very Bugs Bunny fucking... He has this new dance. It's like the fucking... It's like that Fortnite dance where the kids put their arms behind and in front of their backs, but like he does it with the chainsaw over his head, like putting it in front of behind his head and like kicking his legs up and down while he's doing it like he's got fucking OCD or something, because he has to do the same exact move like every time. So he does this and quote-unquote terrorizes her in possibly the most ridiculous manner ever photographed, in what adds up to little more than about 10 minutes of a botched murder, because Bubba finds himself smitten with the young lady, as I'm sure many in the audience were, and could commiserate with old Bubba, Leatherface. And we also get to see possibly more successful murder, but later on turns out not so successful, when her co-worker and producer, JT, returns and is bludgeoned with a hammer by Chop Top, which, like I said, later on turns out to entail 0 kill shots. After about 20 swings, none of them did the job. This is like literally the exact area where the film, like where I can see many people giving up on this film. It's just so over the top that about 85% of human beings with a normal mind would be compelled to just shut this shit off, which honestly is a big part of my fascination with this movie. Like, logically, it is so fucking bad, but there was so much passion and there was such a big budget behind it. It got to be so much bigger than what the original was, and Tobe Hooper got to have, like, some of his, like, ridiculous fun. Like, his movies with big budgets, like, are usually, like, not very amazing, like, substance-wise, but stylistically, they're amazing. He knew what to do with his budgets. Fault him on whatever you will. The man knew what to do with the money that was being put into his movies. So, once these failed killings are over with, Chop Top and Bubba, Leatherface, take JT, her producer, who they think is a corpse, and toss him in the back of their pickup truck, and just leave, because Bubba has told Chop Top that he murdered Stretch, but as the audience knows, he just did some weird chainsaw, like, very weird phallic sex-related stuff with it, which I guess was a big thing that Hooper was trying to do. He was trying to fucking show off how, you know, like Michael Myers' knife, Ghostface's knife, I don't know, Dirty Harry's gun, like, it's all just, like, a dick. And, like, he showed Leatherface as, like, using it in a form that he'd never used it before in like a sexual manner, and he didn't know what the fuck to do with it. He only knew how to use it to fucking massacre people. and he probably didn't even know how to use his penis. I don't know. Maybe, oh man. If only Tobe Hooper could have done a documentary about Leatherface and discussed if his saw was actually his penis, or if he had a penis. Oh shit, I think the little kid's downstairs, a little below me, just heard that. But alright, so after they leave, we zip right along like we were before. Stretch chases the brothers down to Texas Battleland, the location of possibly the most ridiculous third act of all time. The place is an abandoned, like, barbecue-themed amusement park. Like it looks like the Alamo or whatever. It's just like a big mountain, and fuck, it's something you gotta see to believe. It's which the Sawyer family has turned into their new lair for cannibalism. Dinner time. She was followed by Lefty, luckily, who found her before Chop Top and Leatherface do, because they would inevitably have found her, because she just went there by herself with no real plan of what to do. So luckily, Lefty Enfield shows up to save her. But, before he can whisk her away to safety, save the day, she falls through a sinkhole, just like what the evil I was talking about earlier, and down underground into the home of the family of cannibals, leaving Lefty to follow her in with a big chainsaw in both hands, because, it was so big it needed both hands again. The dick thing. And then he's got two similar ones, like little tiny dual-action ones on his hips. And this is where Hopper's manic performance really starts to take the wheel, and the film just fucking loses it. All the way loses it. Like, with almost zero coherent dialogue left in this movie, Enfield just roams through the annals of the theme park and just blindly uses this gigantic saw to just cut through load-bearing wood in their underground house and buttresses, all while screaming a bunch of shit about God. And like I don't even know if it's actual, like, scripture or anything like that, or if he's just like, because you can't even really hear what he's saying, and that's like part of what's so amazing about this. Maybe that's why he thinks this was like the worst thing ever, because I mean, like none of it really made any sense. Like his character didn't really make that much sense in Apocalypse Now. Maybe I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I mean, like, at least it had a cohesive part in that movie. I could see how he, like, thought he just looked like he was probably still on drugs, and that's probably I'd say that's a pretty good guess as to why he probably hates this so much. All right, so this is around the time that the family finds Stretch again, because she was inevitably going to be found after falling down into the house, the subterranean house, where she actually finds JT, who's had his face cut off, and then she has another little lovey-dovey moment with Bubba, who takes JT's face and puts it on hers while JT's crawling towards her with his face cut off and just his fucked up head from getting bashed in the head so many times. It's so ridiculous. This. All right, well, I digress. After a little bit, both Chop Top and Drayton catch Bubba Leatherface trying to have a good time with her by playing dress up with other people's faces with these human skin masks. So they again take her hostage and terrorize her in that fucking ridiculous cartoonish way, which once again takes up a good chunk of time for a more over-the-top dinner scene than we even had in the previous installment, or any other of these other Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. None of them could top this dinner scene, if you ask me. Where we once again see the family attempt to give Grandpa the honors of bashing the bitch's brains in. Which again turns out even more embarrassing and disgusting than the original. We get even more disgusting spit, dropped hammers, and again, she just gets little whacks in the head, and I think she just gets more scared than anything else. Oh, man, creeps, I really did not expect me to go so fucking deep into Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but I guess there's a lot more to this than I expected that there was. And I mean, from what I'm saying, I guess a lot of it doesn't really hinge on Dennis Hopper's performance. I guess the paint that was used to color him in the movie, both from him and Tobe, from the script with what the character was in general. I just think it was the most vibrant color in the whole painting of the story, or whatever you want to call it, movie, piece of music, fucking, however you relate it. I'm going off the rails here, baby. Alright. So, all of this is happening with them, you know, it's the same as the original. The ha 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 ha, Grandpa, kill that bitch, and still doing that even when it's very obvious that nothing is going, that, you know, if they're going to want to get it done, they're going to have to do it themselves, but they're just so pumped that Grandpa has come out to play for dinner time once again, just like in the original. I don't know, that guy must have been a real life of the party before he became whatever the fuck he is. I don't know. I don't even think they specify how old he is, because it is 15 years later. Drayton does say something about a pure liquid diet that must keep him so vital and living, because who knows, that guy might be fucking 200 years old. Because there's another relation there I think I see in House of a Thousand Corpses, that the underground part where they meet Dr. Satan, and Dr. Satan reminds me a lot of Grandpa and how he lives, like, through this fucking liquid diet, I'm assuming, of blood, which, who knows, maybe if you did just fucking mainline blood, that you could just live forever. I mean, has anybody ever tried it? I'm not saying that you should, but, I mean, who knows? Maybe it could work. Okay, so this is all long, drawn out, just like in the original, but even more ridiculous just because of the locale, which again has to be seen to be believed. Until Lefty finally locates them and, you know, crashes the party in his fucking good old boy law enforcer type of way. He frees Stretch, cutting her bindings with his chainsaw, and then right away engaged in some full-blown combat with Bubba. And I think you know what kind of weapons they're using. That's right. Talking about the saw. And this scene, once again, I just love cartoons, I guess, because this just reminds me of, like, it's a real life, like, I think that's why I love these types of fucking horror movies so much, is because they literally, like, I feel like Creepshow kind of elevated the horror genre to a new level of people just straight up trying to kind of make EC Comics into movies. Like, the lighting structure and just, like, these fucking, like, so fake, but, like, because they're so fake, they look so cartoonish type of sets. I'm so fascinated with it. So, like I said, you gotta see this set to believe it. I can't even give half of... I can't even do it justice by half. So, like I said, this scene's a great bit of fun in my humble opinion. Going as far as having the two men actually, like I said, clashing these fucking power tools together, creating a massive amount of sparks, which are real, so I'm assuming that the teeth must have been removed from these chainsaws to render this effect for the movie, and that there must have been some heavy stunt double use, unless... what the fuck's his name? Unless the new Leatherface or Bubba had been hired for his stunt abilities, but Hopper definitely was not doing half of this shit, like jumping over the swings and stuff like that. I mean, unless Hopper was actually that batshit during his return to the world of the living. We also cut to a battle on the peak of the amusement park between Chop Top and Stretch, which ends with her being another powerful final girl that Tobe Hooper has created. I mean, he was really, I think, the first one to have the final survivor and to have it be a powerful female character. Like this, the whole final girl idea is very, very interesting to me. And in this one, he kind of just knocks it up a notch, because in the first one, it's someone that you're so kind of unwilling to believe could bring herself to that level, that she could be a survivor over, you know, all these, I mean, other people who seem like they're more powerful than her, but they're just robbed of pride and power by fucking Leatherface. So again, I think it's really neat that he was just trying to push the boundaries of what was going on, because everyone else was kind of copying him in that idea of a girl that you don't think is going to fucking make it, but in the end, hey, she makes it. And with this final girl, he doesn't make it a surprise. Like, you really never have... There's never really any point in this movie where you think that Stretch is going to die. So this ends with her knocking Chop Top back down into the pit with the chainsaw that she finds inside of their grandmother's skeleton. And he goes down into the pit before the credits roll, and she's doing even better than the laugh scene at the end, because she's literally holding the chainsaw and just fucking going nuts with it like Leatherface is in the original, so, to just show that even the final girl can be that barbaric. She doesn't have to push herself to that... I mean, she does have to be pushed to that point, but she can be just as barbaric as the people chasing her. Like, she's tough, but she can be loco tough if you push her. And honestly, it's a very open-ended finale in this sense, and because Lefty honestly seems even more likely to have survived, because that guy's seems like a goddamn cockroach, like this family. But him and the family apparently die in this, and Stretch comes back to make a cameo in part 3, and she's been promoted from radio personality to television reporter. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because the family is gone in part 3, but Leatherface is still there. And how would Leatherface have survived if Chop Top died, Drayton died, Lefty died? Like, Lefty had to have been a goddamn fucking cockroach, if you ask me, the way that Toby set that up. So, I mean, I've looked into it, and I guess they kind of retconned the second movie, as in they just fucking forgot about it. I think I used this term in our first podcast together, where I was discussing how I cut together my my 3 Venture Bros specials, and yeah, I think that's what they did with the third one, that they just forgot about the second one and picked up where the first one had left off, and that's how Leatherface Bubba is still alive. I don't know. These things confuse me deeply, because we're in a world of reboots and it just all remakes, reboots, retcons. It's all just, it's so fucking confusing. So yeah, that's if you couldn't tell, that's really it as far as the grandeur of the story of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So, I mean, let's get into this bizarre state of mind that Hopper was in. It reminds me of only one other film that he's made. One that I saw after this one, and that was a little movie from 10 years before this that Tobe Hooper directed, called Eaten Alive, with no exclamation point. Be sure, if you're looking for this movie, it is not the one with an exclamation point. Yeah, so like I said, be sure, note that. No exclamation point if you want to check this movie out. I mean, unless you want to watch a worse version of Cannibal Holocaust, watch Eaten Alive with an exclamation point then. Anyway, it's another amazingly goofy and disturbing movie about a good old boy who owns a motel with his pet alligator in the front pond, and take a wild guess what purpose the pet serves. Anyway, I'd highly recommend it to anybody that hasn't seen it and has like an affinity for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, or you know any of those movies from that kind of like renaissance of thinking in horror movies, when Tom Savini kind of made, like, I think Tom Savini was a big part of what made all these movies feel like EC Comics. It's an interesting point in time when he came back from Vietnam and was fucking making all of these ridiculously disgusting effects from awful things that he'd seen in Vietnam. Like, apparently he saw someone with their leg blown off, and it was inside of, like, I don't know what kind of water it was in, but it was some form of, like, knee-deep water, and the guy was, like, on his ass, and Tom Savini could see this dude's leg, like, the veins that were sticking out and everything, and the fucking arteries, like, trying to fucking sip up the water like they would sip up blood, and spurting out blood at the same time. It was fucking one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of. And I think that experience really must have it's changed so many people's lives, because he brought such a horrible thing home that could ruin so many people, and made such an amazing career out of it, that really kind of turned the horror genre on its head and made it fun. Well, more fun than it was before, I'd say. And in this Eaten Alive movie, we get some amazing performances from a super young Robert Englund. Neville Brand plays the motel owner. He's the American World War II veteran in that episode of The Twilight Zone with George Takei, where he's the Japanese guy who's fucking locked in the room with the American veteran, and their fucking hatred towards each other from that conflict really starts to fucking stir between the two of them. I don't know if you've never seen that. The guy's in Gunsmoke and Bonanza, I think. And finally, we get Morticia Addams herself is in this, Carolyn Jones, who sadly is way past her primes in the looks department in this one, but she gives a really nice, awesome turn as an over the hill. Like you can tell that she was as good looking as she was as Morticia Addams, but you can tell that she's over the hill, like she's a cat house owner, and it fits perfectly. It's an amazing film. Like I said, if the cartoonish quality of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 tickles your fancy, and you've never seen Eaten Alive without an exclamation point, like, you gotta do it ASAP. Only thing is, I can only imagine what it would have been like if Hopper had played the main character instead of Neville Brand. It would have been very interesting to have seen such a perfect before and after picture of this, because there will probably never be another movie that feels like either of these movies. And that's because of Tobe Hooper. And there obviously won't be another collaboration between Hopper and Hooper because, sadly, both of them are no longer with us. I mean, personally, I would have found this such an interesting dynamic because Hopper was such an interesting fucking person. Like I said, fucking him in Texas Chainsaw 2 and Blue Velvet are, like, if you showed me those two things and said, like, yeah, there was a point where this guy was on drugs, I would think that was the point where the man was on the most amount of drugs. But, like, apparently he was so fucked up on drugs in the 70s that Dennis would, like, require drugs to be, like, listed discreetly for him on call sheets for pretty much everything he worked on, like a stick and a carrot type of deal. I guess he took Apocalypse Now out of, like, sheer desperation for work. I mean, I'm sure he wanted to work on it, to fucking work on Francis Ford Coppola's movie after... Well, actually, I don't know if the Conversation might have been his movie after Godfather 2. I'm not positive on the timeline on that. I'm too much of a man from the future. But yeah, so he took that out of, because, like, no one would hire him, and Apocalypse Now, like, turned out to just be like, they were really spitballing it because they didn't have an ending at the point where he took the job, and Marlon Brando is also being extremely difficult, which he's a lot more famous for. And it like it said, it turned out that the script was constantly being changed. So he ended up just, like, coming up, like, picking out of his ass while he's definitely high on cocaine, tripping out on acid definitely, with some shit about fractions in space. Well, like, he, like I said, he must have been at least 10 times more fucked up than I could ever conceive of being. And I am no pure little Boy Scout. I have experimented and experienced, and that man was far more experienced than I could have ever dreamed of being, like, I don't know, dumb enough or brave enough to be, whichever you'd like to call it. Because, like, alright, let me just pull up his lines from Apocalypse Now so that you can hear just how fucking batshit he was.
We're the Hollow Men.
Yeah, here we go.
We're the Stuffed Men.
Yeah, he like demanded as part of the work that he do this scene with Marlon Brando, but Marlon Brando hated him so much that he refused to go on set with him, so he didn't even get to share this scene with Marlon. Alright, I'll shut up.
Oh, he's out there.
Here we go. Here's Dennis.
He's really out there.
Shape without form. Shade without color. Paralyzed force. Gesture without motion.
Do you know what the man's saying? Do you?
Those who are crossed with direct eyes.
This is dialectics. It's very simple dialectics, 1 through 9. No maybes, no supposes, no fractions. You can't travel in space. You can't go out into space, without, with fractions. What are you going to land on? 1/4, 3/8? What are you going to do when you go from here to Venus or something? That's dialectic physics, okay? Dialectic logic is there's only love and hate. You either love somebody or you hate them.
And Marlon Brando throws a motherfucking banana at him while he's saying this. Oh my god. Oh man. All right. Well, I don't know if there are too many of you creeps out there who are wrestling fans, but you need to hear how similar this fucking math shit that the president of ignorance, Scott Steiner, said in a promo, like, I don't know, fucking 20 years ago.
Well, they say all men are created equal, but you look at me and you look at Small Joe, and you can see that statement is not true. See, normally if you go one-on-one with another wrestler, you got a 50-50 chance of winning. But I'm a genetic freak, and I'm not normal. So you got a 25% at best at beating me. And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix, your chances of winning drastically go down. See, the three-way at sacrifice, you got a 33 and a third chance of winning. But
And then you're going to space. You can't go to space on those odds.
Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me, and he's not.
Kurt Angle knows he can't go to space to beat me.
Take your 33 and a third chance minus my 25% chance, and you got an 8 and a third chance of winning at sacrifice. But then you take my 75% chance of winning.
And there's no way you're getting to the moon, but I'm winning.
66 and 2/3%. I got 141 and 2/3 chance of winning at sacrifice. See, Joe, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster for you at sacrifice.
If only somebody had cut together Marlon Brando screaming that like he did to Dennis Hopper after he spews that nonsense. Oh, somebody should cut that together. Well, whatever. I just thought that was very funny that those two those two things that they're saying are like the exact same thing. They're both just so drugged up with. In Scott Steiner's sense, he has a microphone, and in Dennis Hopper's, he's doing a scene in a movie with a camera on him. He is mic'd up, and fucking he's just literally spewing nonsense just like that. And it made it into one of the most popular. That scene made it into one of the most popular films ever, which is ridiculous. But that just goes to show you how ridiculous of a man he was at this point. So, like I'm saying, so let's get away from that. 10 years later after that, we see him here as Lefty and as Frank Booth in Blue Velvet, which I was talking about earlier, well, never mind. He's playing these characters in equally fucked up states of mind that just must have been his concentrated frustration at the prospect of having to be sober for the rest of his fucking life. Because, he was at the point where he was getting so coked up and drunk that he'd regularly walk down Mexican highways bare-assed. And, he'd blow off fireworks or, I don't know, he'd, set up a fucking, in the desert, he'd set up a fucking, a lawn chair, and I think they said it was TNT, but I really think it must have been fireworks, and he'd put them all around him in a circle. And I guess he would light them all at the same time, and, I guess the blast would bounce off of each other. Don't ask me how that worked. Don't ask me how he survived the drug use, doing that. Don't ask me anything. I'm not a fucking scientist. I did not know him personally. I have just read these stories, third or fourth hand. And he was clearly not a scientist either, but, he must have seen someone else do it before trying it himself. He must have had some idea that this at least might work. Because it didn't seem like an actual suicide attempt. More like a carnival stunt that just horrifies the entire audience. Because people would fucking watch this. People would gather around and watch it like it was a fucking freak show. So, if you didn't know, now you know. There's a little bit of a crash course on Dennis Hopper's prolific drug use from 1969 to 1984, 85. And if you haven't seen at least two of these movies from 1986, from the point after he first got sober, he flat out went insane. I think in 85 when he first went sober and was weaning off of these multiple dependencies. Definitely given him some insane recesses to fall into for this wild work, because, the man was literally insane. I guess he just, would sit in a room and not move fucking Norman Bates style when he was, because he went to rehab, and then I think he went to a mental institution after that. Or it might have been he went to the mental institution and then went to rehab. I don't know. He might have doubled down on rehab and just had the mental institution in between because he was so fucking out of his mind. But, I mean, especially in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Blue Velvet, you can see how low he must have gotten. The latter especially, Blue Velvet, I think that Dennis and this are gonna need another episode from me in October for the 32nd birthday. I mean, we have far too much respect for David Lynch and this film in particular to, shortchange it so hard. Because we did, I was going to say it earlier, but we went definitely a lot deeper into Chainsaw and Dennis Hopper's escapades than I'd originally anticipated. And, that should give us a strong part 2, something you guys can look forward to for the next few months. You can shout out some requests for what you might want to hear, in the comments or one of our social media outlets, Twitter, Instagram. Follow us if you haven't already. And, I mean, if you're listening to this on the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. I mean, we're always watching, we're always listening. But there will be another episode dedicated to another one of his movies from this year. Like I said, we're getting a Blue Velvet episode in October. Don't worry, that's a promise. But I think you'd rather hear me rattle off bullshit about something like that than Hoosiers. I'm going on a wing and a prayer that you want to hear a Blue Velvet episode more than you want to hear a Hoosiers episode. And I mean, if you do want to hear that more than you would want to hear Blue Velvet, you possibly may be the creepiest creep out there listening. But that's about all I got to say for today on Hopper and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I said everything I could say about Texas Chainsaw, but Hopper we can save for another day. Save some more of his ridiculously fucked up experiences before we go into his most ridiculously fucked up role of Frank Booth. That's coming up. The Nun will be coming out on September 7th, so the week following that, you can definitely expect me to give an episode on that, because I'm very, very firm in my feelings that Corin Hardy is going to steer that in the right direction, especially since YouTube has taken down the ads for The Nun, because so many people complained. And after that, there's the 14th. Man, it's going to be a fucking crazy couple weeks. The 14th, we get Mandy coming out with Nicolas Cage, which is made by... what the fuck's that guy's name? It's a crazy name. He made that Beyond the Black Rainbow movie, which fucked me up. So I think that's going to be the week after. I'm going to do one on... The week after the 14th, I'm going to do one on Mandy, because I'm definitely going to see that, and I'm going to compare and contrast that to Black Rainbow, see if it fucked me up quite as hard. Because also on the 14th, we're going to be getting The Predator from Shane Black. And I also have extreme confidence in this movie. So I'm a big, big Predator fan. And since, again, like I said, I think they're doing a retcon on this and just having 1 and 2 is the only ones that are going to count. Fuck AVP. Fuck that Predators movie. And Shane Black's just going to pick up from where the second one left off. Because apparently Jake Busey, the son in real life of Gary Busey, is going to be playing Gary Busey's character from Predator 2's fictional son in the new one. I just think it seems like it's going to be a fucking great time, and I can't wait to bring you guys that one. Okay, so for my creepers, my creepettes, my little creeplings, maybe. Hope I didn't offend you too much if you're a creepling. That's all I really got for you today. I'm going to be going on vacation for the next couple of days, so I might be a little bit more... they could take over the social media. I'm usually the one that's front and center for everything, but, they can take over a little bit while I'm on vacation. So maybe I won't be able to converse with you quite as much, but I love you, creeps, and until next week, this has been the Horrid Lore Podcast.